welcome to Humanityx. Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It might seem like a small gesture, but it actually helps YouTube share the story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to know who's watching. It was supposed to be a peaceful evening on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. Jack Ryland, a retired U.S. Marine, was fixing the porch light when the sky lit up with an eerie blue glow. Before he could reach for his rifle, the world spun, and darkness swallowed him whole. When he awoke, the air felt sterile, too clean, and the walls shimmered with metallic patterns. His instincts kicked in instantly. This wasn't Earth, and whoever took him had no idea what kind of man they had just messed with. The Tsar Dominion had abducted thousands across the galaxy, breaking civilizations with calculated precision. Their method was simple: isolate, disorient, and dismantle the mind. It had worked flawlessly for centuries. But Jack didn't cower when the interrogators came. He leaned back in his floating restraint chair, smirked, and asked if they served whiskey. For the first time in generations, the Dominion's enforcers hesitated. The Tsar had expected fear, tears, and pleading. What they got instead was sarcasm, an off-key rendition of The Star-Spangled Banner, and Jack demanding they return his boots. Confused by the humans' complete lack of terror, they increased their psychological tactics: false memories, visual distortions, sleep deprivation. Jack laughed through them all, sometimes sharing war stories that unsettled even the AI recorders monitoring him. When the lead interrogator, a sleek and terrifying entity named Vorkash, approached Jack for the first time, it found itself at a loss. "You should be broken by now," Vorkash hissed. Jack grinned. "I survived 3 tours, 2 marriages, and 1 Thanksgiving with my ex's family. You think this is tough?" The alien stared, silently recalculating everything it thought it knew about human psychology. Vorkash initiated the next phase: deep neural mirroring, a technique that forced a subject to relive their most painful memories in perfect detail. It was designed to tear apart the psyche, to unravel the core of a being. They expected screams. Instead, Jack leaned into the simulation and whispered, "Bring it." As Jack's past materialized, ambushes in Fallujah, the smell of burning metal, the faces of fallen friends, he felt the weight but didn't break. He walked through each scene with fists clenched and head high. When the simulation ended, the Tsar interrogators reviewed the data, stunned by something they'd never encountered: resilience born of real suffering. Their tactics weren't working. In fact, they were backfiring. Jack began to taunt his captors. He named one of the emotionless drones Sparky, and asked it for dating advice. He used sarcasm like a scalpel, slicing through the Tsar's cold detachment. The Tsar didn't understand humor. They couldn't process it. Jack weaponized that confusion, cracking jokes during every interrogation, making light of their threats. It wasn't just defiance. It was tactical psychological warfare. Soon, low-level technicians requested reassignment. Vorkash began to avoid Jack's cell unless absolutely necessary. The Dominion had always believed fear was the ultimate weapon. Jack was showing them something they never expected: the disarming power of laughter. Every punchline was a data point the Tsar couldn't interpret, and that scared them more than any scream. On day 21, something changed. A young Tsar scholar named Kelzi, assigned to study Jack's mental structure, approached with a simple question: "Why don't you fear us?" Jack shrugged. "Because fear only works if you let it." The answer didn't compute. Kelzi asked again. Jack told him about boot camp, about losing friends, about what it means to keep going when everything hurts. Kelzi watched the human with a mix of curiosity and something else: respect. The Dominion had crushed civilizations by destroying their will. But Jack's will wasn't a brittle thing. It was forged like steel in the fires of war and loss. Jack wasn't invincible, but he was immovable. And for the first time in Tsar history, one of their own began to question the morality of conquest. The more Kelzi observed Jack, the more cracks he noticed in the Dominion's supposed perfection. Reports from other sectors showed small, inexplicable failures. Unexplained disobedience from conquered species. Patterns of resistance emerging. Kelzi began to wonder if Jack's defiance was a fluke, or a signal of something larger. Meanwhile, Jack had started learning the Tsar language through their interface, leaving sarcastic graffiti on walls, like "Aliens suck at poker" and "Free hugs, tiny tentacle edition." The guards hated it. Kelzi found it fascinating. Humor wasn't just Jack's defense mechanism. It was a way of reclaiming control. A quiet revolution of thought in a sterile cell. Kelzi made the mistake of showing Jack's footage to other scholars. The result was chaos. Debates broke out, protocols questioned. For the first time, Dominion researchers asked if the system they'd upheld for millennia could be flawed. Jack's resilience had become a contagion. Jack, unaware of the academic firestorm he'd ignited, asked Kelsey if the aliens had pizza. "No," Kelsey replied flatly. "Then no wonder y'all are so cranky," Jack quipped. That line, later translated and archived, would become the first human meme to sweep through the Dominion's academic circles. Vorkash convened with the High Command. Jack Ryland wasn't an anomaly anymore. He was a pattern. Humanity was showing signs of psychological immunity to standard Tsar manipulation. Worse, they were contagious. Other captives exposed to Jack started pushing back too. A mining colony on Ganymede rioted after overhearing one of Jack's jokes on a smuggled broadcast. Jack didn't know it yet, but he had become a symbol, not just of defiance, but of possibility. His mind wasn't just unbroken, it was infectious. The Tsar were beginning to fear not the weapons Earth might bring, but the minds it already had. Kelsey, now fully enthralled by Jack's mindset, secretly transmitted a short message back to Earth. Just a few lines of dialogue, a glimpse into Jack's interrogation, and his unwavering spirit. The message slipped past Tsar firewalls and hit the global net. Humanity saw it. And humanity responded. Jack had become a rallying point, a spark for coordinated resistance. The Tsar hadn't anticipated how loud humans could be when one of their own was in chains. Inspired by Jack, human prisoners across Tsar ships began to act out. Quiet compliance turned to open mockery. Subtle defiance to full-blown rebellion. Guards were overwhelmed not by violence, but by confusion and disruption. The Tsar had never encountered species who fought psychological warfare with banter, ballads, and bad jokes. Jack's influence even reached species the Dominion had long broken. Some began to remember the fire they once had. Entire planets started whispering human words, "You don't win until we quit." The Dominion's fear weapon had become its liability. Kelsey, now a traitor in the eyes of the Dominion, plotted with Jack. A supply drone would arrive in 6 days, unmanned. Jack could override the signal and escape. It was risky. The Dominion would detect the breach within minutes. But it was enough time, if everything went right. Jack didn't hesitate. The thought of home, of Earth watching him now, burned in his chest. He trained, meditated, and joked like nothing had changed. The moment came. The override worked. But a silent alarm tripped. As the drone took off, Dominion interceptors scrambled. Kelsey watched from the shadows, praying for a miracle. The drone hurtled through hyperspace, Jack at the controls, blood pounding in his ears. The Tsar followed relentlessly. He wasn't a prisoner anymore, he was an icon. And they couldn't afford for the galaxy to see a symbol of their failure return to Earth. Jack dodged debris fields, overloaded warp tunnels, and even used a supernova's gravity to shake one tail. But fuel was running low, and he was still days from Earth. Every hour was a gamble, every minute a defiance of odds. And Jack lived for that. Earth received Jack's signal. It was short, battered, and full of static, but the voice came through, "I'm coming home." Governments mobilized. Military satellites tracked incoming Dominion fleets. Civilians hoarded canned goods and memes. But fear wasn't the dominant reaction. It was unity. Jack had reminded humanity who they were. Science teams developed frequency-based countermeasures to Tsar tech. Hackers created disruption tools using Dominion data leaked by Kelsey. For the first time, Earth wasn't reacting. It was preparing. Not to survive, to fight. The drone breached the solar system just as Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace. Earth's planetary defenses launched everything they had. Lasers screamed through space. EMP waves fried enemy circuits. Jack guided the damaged drone like a comet through the chaos. He crash-landed in a Nevada desert, crawling from the wreckage with smoke rising behind him. Soldiers rushed in, expecting a casualty. But Jack stood up, bleeding and laughing. "Told ya I'd be back in time for dinner." Jack was rushed to a secure facility, patched up, and immediately began briefing Earth's leaders. He didn't talk strategy. He talked psychology. They're bullies. Smart bullies. But they crumble when you don't break. A new plan formed. Earth wouldn't just fight. It would infect. Humanity's unbreakable mindset became a weapon. Hacked Dominion broadcasts were filled with stand-up routines, punk music, and scenes of human perseverance. The Tsar couldn't block it fast enough. Earth's message to the galaxy went live: "We are humanity. We laugh in darkness. We rise from ashes. And we will not be broken." It was translated into 100 tongues. Entire worlds saw Jack's face, heard his voice, and found hope. The Dominion tried to jam it, but rebellion had already taken root. Jack had become the virus they couldn't contain. Planets once loyal to the Dominion began to fracture. Kel'Zi, now leading a rogue faction within the Dominion, coordinated with Earth. Together, they initiated Project Liberation. Dominion databases were leaked. Prisoners freed. Dominion outposts fell in coordinated uprisings. Kel'Zi stood before his own people and declared, "We were wrong. Humanity showed us truth." It wasn't betrayal. It was evolution. The galaxy began to shift. Earth, the rebels, and defected species launched a final assault on the Dominion core. Jack led from orbit. He wasn't a general. He was a symbol. But every soldier followed him like he was both. The battle raged for days. Zar AI collapsed under the chaotic creativity of human and rebel tactics. In the end, the core fell not with an explosion, but with a broadcast, Jack reading a letter he wrote in captivity. It ended with, "You never broke me, and you never will." The Dominion crumbled. Freed species began rebuilding. Earth offered aid, jokes, and pizza. Jack declined all medals. He just wanted to go home, fix his porch, and drink a cold one. But his story was told everywhere. Statues weren't erected in his honor. Instead, murals of his sarcastic graffiti appeared across galaxies. Jack had become legend. Not for killing, but for refusing to kneel. Years later, children of a dozen species played together on neutral planets. They quoted Jack. They mocked fear. They laughed loudly. And in Texas, Jack Ryland sat in a rocking chair, beer in hand, looking at the stars. He knew the Tsar would never fully understand humanity. Because strength wasn't about muscles or warships. It was about surviving pain. And cracking a joke anyway. Hey dear, let me know where you're watching from. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you are, kindly hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. Now, let's find out what comes next. The victory over the Dominion was just the beginning. Jack Ryland's name had become a symbol not just of defiance but of unity, and it echoed across galaxies in ways no one had expected. The Unity Accord was officially formed, and for the first time in millennia, species once subjugated under the Tsar rule stood together with humanity, forging alliances that spanned light years. Jack, despite his fame and accolades, chose the role of mentor, guiding civilizations through the difficult process of rebuilding after centuries of tyranny. But he never stayed in one place too long. The thrill of the fight was behind him. Now, he was focused on something much bigger, sowing the seeds of peace that would grow through cooperation and understanding. Yet, even as the galaxy began to heal, old threats loomed. The Tsar were not the only empire out there, and not every species was pleased with the new status quo. Pirates, warlords, and would-be conquerors began to rise, drawn to the power vacuum left by the Dominion's fall. As Earth and her allies strengthened, Jack saw the writing on the wall. It wasn't just about saving planets or freeing people. It was about maintaining the peace they'd fought so hard to achieve. This time, however, they would not be alone. The Unity Accord wasn't just an alliance. It was a movement, and it was growing. New heroes began to rise, inspired by the legacy of Jack Ryland. His story was no longer just one of survival. It was the beginning of a new era, a time when species didn't just exist under a regime of fear but thrived in the freedom of their shared strength. And Jack, always on the move, continued his journey. Not because he had to, but because he knew what it meant to carry the weight of an entire universe. His mission now was simple: ensure that the light they'd ignited would never fade, and that humanity would always be a beacon of hope in the stars. As the stars themselves twinkled with the promise of a better future, Jack Ryland couldn't help but smile. His fight was over, but the war for freedom was far from finished. And in the quiet of space, where even time seemed to stretch and bend, the legend of humanity's unyielding spirit would continue to grow. The Unity Accord had brought an uneasy peace to the galaxy, but Jack Ryland knew that peace was never permanent. Even as humanity and their allies rebuilt, the remnants of the Tsar Empire lingered like a shadow. Their influence hadn't disappeared, it had simply gone underground. Hidden factions of Tsar loyalists, bent on restoring their shattered dominion, were moving in the dark, gathering strength. And Jack, ever the vigilant veteran, had sensed it long before anyone else. One evening, Jack sat alone in his quarters aboard the Titan Horizon, staring at a star map projected in front of him. Each blip represented a world, a species, a dream. The galaxy was no longer the hostile place it once was, but he felt it, something was coming. A disturbance in the Force, as the old Earth saying went. Or, in his case, a new enemy slowly creeping closer, masked by the comforting silence of space. He had been receiving messages from an old ally, Kira, a former Tsar defector who had proven invaluable in the fight against her people. Her latest reports were filled with cryptic warnings. The silent storm is coming. Prepare yourself. She had always spoken in riddles, but this time, there was a tremor in her voice, a fear Jack had never heard before. The silence was shattered by the urgent chime of his comms. It was Kira. "Jack, you're not going to like this," her voice crackled through the line. "The Tsar are not alone. I've uncovered something, and it's bigger than we ever imagined. There's a dark force beyond their reach, a species, the Xylok. They've been manipulating the Dominion for centuries, pulling their strings from the shadows. And now, they're making their move." Jack's blood ran cold. The Xylok. The name sounded familiar. An ancient, almost mythical species, rumored to have once been the rulers of an entire galaxy before their fall. Legends told of their mind-bending technology and their insatiable hunger for control. The kind of creatures that didn't just conquer, they consumed. "How do we stop them?" Jack asked, his voice flat, though his mind raced. "You can't," Kira replied with grim certainty. "At least, not alone. The Xylok are different. They feed on fear, on chaos. They've mastered the art of manipulation, not through force, but through emotion. They create wars by planting seeds of doubt, and they've set their sights on Earth." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Earth. The home he had fought so hard to protect. "What are we looking at here? How soon?" "They're already here," Kira said. "Infiltrating. We've already seen signs. Small things. Fissures between former allies. Sowing distrust where there was once unity. It's just the beginning. And the worst part is, they've been feeding on the chaos we've left behind. The Tsar Wars, the Dominion's fall, every crack in the galaxy's foundation is their feast." Jack's mind was already working overtime, calculating. The Xylok thrived on manipulation, on breaking down societies from within. He had seen their kind before, powerful and insidious, lurking just below the surface, pulling at the strings of every conflict. "Then we'll find them," Jack said, his voice steely. "And we'll end them before they can do any more damage. This time, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for something bigger." Kira's laugh was almost dark, a mix of disbelief and resolve. "Good luck, Jack. The Xylok don't play by any rules, you know." Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the stars once more. The universe was never going to give him a break, he realized. But that's what made him who he was. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long. And now, he wasn't just fighting for the future of Earth. He was fighting for the soul of the entire galaxy. The Xylok might have their tricks, but they hadn't met a human who had seen the very worst of the galaxy and still came out laughing. Jack wasn't about to let fear dictate his future. "Let's see if they're ready for us," he muttered, as he hit the command to assemble the team. The war for the galaxy's soul was about to take a new turn, and this time, humanity would be ready to fight, not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous. Hope, humor, and the unrelenting spirit of survival. Jack Ryland stood on the observation deck of the Titan horizon, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The stars flickered in the distance, cold and indifferent, as the ship drifted through the silence. But Jack wasn't alone. In the shadow of the deck, a handful of veterans gathered, people who had fought beside him against the Tsar and were now preparing for a battle that none of them truly understood. Kira's words echoed in his mind. "The Xylok don't play by any rules, you know." They weren't just conquerors, they were manipulators, able to break the spirit of entire civilizations without ever raising a hand. Jack had seen enough of the galaxy to know that when something like this arose, it wasn't just a war to be fought with weapons. It was a battle for the very soul of everything they had worked to build. His team had assembled. There was General Cass, the grizzled leader of the Alliance's forces, a woman with the same weary eyes that Jack had, eyes that had seen too many wars. Then there was Vok, a former Tsar soldier who had defected and joined their ranks, his experience invaluable. Together, they represented the last remnants of the greatest military alliance ever formed. And now, they would stand together once more, not just to defend Earth but to prevent an ancient force from plunging the galaxy back into chaos. "You know the Xylok are the oldest of the ancient races, right?" Cass's voice broke the silence. She wasn't asking for confirmation. She was stating a fact. They're not just masters of war. They thrive on manipulation. They control minds, stir up hatred, make you see enemies where there are none. They're like a virus, infecting the thoughts of entire species until nothing remains but chaos. Jack turned toward her, his jaw clenched. And we've already seen their influence on our allies. The Tsar were only their first test. They've been feeding on the cracks we've left behind, sowing division, turning us against each other. But we can't let them succeed this time. We won't. Vok stepped forward, his broad frame casting a shadow over the table they were gathered around. "I've fought with a Xyloc before," he said, his voice low, almost haunted. "They've been lurking in the shadows for centuries, manipulating the Dominion from within. But their strength lies not in their technology. It lies in their ability to warp your mind, to make you question everything you believe in. They're not invincible. They're just playing the long game." Cass nodded, her face grim. "Which means we've got to stop them before they gain any more power. And that means we need to act fast. We can't wait for them to strike. We need to bring the fight to them, hit them before they even know what's coming." Jack glanced at the holomap, which was now showing a series of blinking dots representing known Xyloc activity across several sectors. They had already infiltrated key systems, spreading their influence like a virus. Jack wasn't going to let them turn Earth into one of their breeding grounds. "We have a limited window," Jack said, his voice steady. "The longer we wait, the harder it will be to stop them. We go in, we find their source, and we hit them with everything we've got. We don't wait for them to make the next move, we make it for them." The group exchanged looks of silent agreement. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. They had seen what the galaxy had become under the thumb of the Tsar and other warlords. They weren't going to let the Xyloc have the same power. But even as the team began to prepare, Jack knew the true difficulty of this mission. It wasn't about firepower or tactics. It was about resisting the psychological warfare the Xyloc were known for. They didn't just want to destroy them physically, they wanted to break their minds, to make them turn on each other. And that's where Jack had the advantage. Humanity had been through hell. Their resilience wasn't just built on weapons or strategy. It was forged in the fires of trauma, of hardship, and of fighting an enemy that could break the will of any lesser species. But humans weren't like that. They had their scars, their wounds, but they also had something that made them unbreakable: the will to survive, no matter the cost. As the team scattered to prepare, Jack lingered on the deck, his eyes locked on the stars. The Xyloc may have thought they could feed on humanity's fear, but they were about to learn the truth. Humans didn't fear the darkness. They became it. "Get ready," Jack muttered under his breath. "The storm is about to hit." And with that, the Titan horizon shot into the black void, heading toward the unknown and the galaxy's final hope. The Titan horizon cut through the dark expanse of space, its engines a soft hum in the otherwise dead silence. Every crew member aboard knew that this wasn't just another mission. It was a turning point. Their ship was a symbol of humanity's defiance. Its flag held high in the face of an enemy who thrived on fear, control, and psychological manipulation. Jack Ryland stood in the command center, watching the crew prepare for what was coming. They were less than a day out from the Xyloc's suspected base, an abandoned station in a dead sector of the galaxy, surrounded by a nebula that distorted communication signals. It was the perfect place for the Xyloc to hide, their advanced technology making them practically invisible. If they were going to make their move, this would be it. Cass paced in front of the map, Vok at her side, his eyes scanning the readings for any signs of Xyloc presence. "We've hit a few snags. The nebula's interference is more than we anticipated. We're going to have to get close to the station before we can get an accurate scan. It's going to be risky." Jack didn't flinch. "Risky is my middle name. Just make sure we're ready for anything." Kira's voice came through the comms. "Jack, be cautious. If the Xyloc have had time to settle in, they've likely already started working their influence. You've seen how they operate. It won't just be physical threats you're facing. You'll have to keep your team in check. They'll twist your thoughts, turn your fears against you." "I know," Jack replied, his tone flat, but his mind already whirring through possible scenarios. He had seen war, had fought enemies who used tactics to break his will. The Xyloc, though, were something entirely different. They didn't just break bodies, they crushed minds. And they would target his team, pushing them to their limits, exploiting their deepest fears and doubts. Cass turned to Jack, her face etched with resolve. "We're going in full throttle. We'll hit them hard, fast, and before they can react." The plan was simple: break into the station, neutralize any Xyloc agents, and gather intelligence on their operations. What they didn't expect, though, was that the Zylok had anticipated their arrival. The tension on board the Titan Horizon was palpable, each crew member steeling themselves for what lay ahead. It wasn't just the unknown of the station that worried them, it was the very real possibility that the Zylok could manipulate them before they even made contact. As they neared the station's coordinates, the feeling of dread intensified. The nebula outside the ship's viewport swirled in ghostly luminous colors, like a living entity pulling them deeper into the void. Jack's grip tightened on the edge of his console. It wasn't just the mission weighing on him. It was the sense that the enemy was already inside their heads, lurking in the unseen corners of their thoughts. "Ready," Vox said. "All systems are operational. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Jack nodded, glancing around at the faces of his crew. "We go in, and we finish this. No hesitation. We fight, or we die trying." And with that, the ship plunged into the nebula, disappearing into the unknown, the silence around them growing heavier, the uncertainty wrapping tighter. The Titan Horizon was now nestled in the heart of the dead sector. The station loomed before them, a dark silhouette against the nebula's eerie glow. The air was thick with tension. Every crew member aboard had been briefed on the mission. But now that they were here, facing the unknown, even the veterans felt the weight of it all. Jack stood in the airlock, his fingers hovering over the release controls. The team was geared up, ready to board the station, but something gnawed at him, a feeling that had taken root ever since Kira's warning. The Zylok were masters of manipulation, and the station was their perfect hunting ground. The doors hissed open, and the crew stepped into the cold, sterile halls of the station. The lights flickered on, illuminating a series of abandoned corridors. It felt too quiet, too empty. Jack motioned for the team to spread out, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. A series of flashing lights appeared along the walls, and then the voice came, calm, soothing, yet insidiously invasive. "Jack Ryland, you are an interesting specimen. We've watched you, studied you. The mind of a warrior, tempered by trauma. It's fascinating, really. But do you think you can fight us with something as primitive as your will?" The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, wrapping around Jack's mind like a tendril, coiling deeper. He could feel the Zylok's influence seeping in, pushing at the edges of his thoughts. His breath hitched for a moment, but then he regained control. "Oh, not today. Not again. Your games don't work on me," Jack growled, tightening his fists. "I've seen worse. I've faced death, and I've laughed in its face." The voice chuckled, a cold, detached sound. "Oh, Jack, you misunderstand. We don't need to break you. We only need to show you what you truly fear." At that moment, the walls around them shimmered, and the crew was suddenly plunged into vivid, terrifying visions, hallucinations designed to tear at the very fabric of their minds. Jack's vision blurred, and then he was back in a battlefield. Drenched in blood, the bodies of his comrades scattered around him. His hands were shaking as he tried to revive them, but no matter how hard he tried, they remained lifeless. "This is what they want. They want me to break." He forced himself to close his eyes, pushing the memory away, but the voice persisted. "You think you can stop us? You think you can save your precious Earth? You have no idea what you're dealing with. We are the truth behind the veil, Jack. The force that has guided the galaxy for eons. And we have only just begun." The world around him flickered again, this time showing Earth, its cities burning, its people turning on each other in a frenzy of chaos. The Zylok were not merely here to invade, they had come to reshape reality itself. Jack opened his eyes, sweat beading on his forehead, and saw the terrified faces of his crew members. They were starting to crack under the pressure, their minds slipping, their resolve faltering. But then, through the haze, Jack heard something, a sound that cut through the fog of manipulation. A single voice, defiant, steady, his own. "No," he whispered. "We're not done. Not now." The hallucinations faltered, the Zylok's hold slipping for a moment. But Jack knew this was only the beginning. Whatever was coming next, he wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, this war was far from over. And as the station's walls shimmered again, Jack's heart pounded with anticipation. What would they face next? The truth of the Zylok's power was only beginning to reveal itself, and in the darkness of the station, one question remained. Was humanity strong enough to face an enemy that could reshape the fabric of reality itself? The final battle was drawing near. But who would be left to fight when the truth was exposed? And just as Jack's team prepared for the next phase of their desperate mission, a shadow stirred at the edge of the station's main corridor. Something, or someone, was waiting for them. And it wasn't just the Xylock. To be continued.